Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. Hi, and welcome back to the Vital Spirit podcast. I am Dr. Kelly Livingston, and today we're talking about something that I hear almost every day in my clinic, and that is we're talking all about the symptom of constipation, bloating, and that silent struggle to feel at home in your own body. If you've ever said, I eat healthy, but I'm still bloated, or I feel backed up all the time, but I have never found anything that works for me outside of relying on laxatives, or I'm so uncomfortable I can't button my pants, I don't even want to leave the house, then this episode is for you. Constipation and bloating are not just superficial concerns, they're messages from your gut and your nervous system and your hormones, and essentially they're a sign that your terrain needs to be addressed. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why these symptoms happen, especially in perimenopause, and what you can do to find some relief. I'm also going to share a story about a patient named Rachel, whose healing journey is a powerful example of what's possible when we address the real root causes behind digestive discomfort, specifically bloating and constipation. And if you're listening in May or June of 2025, now is the perfect time to jump into the next group of the 21-day gut healing reset. And I'll share some more about that at the end of this episode, because everything that I'm teaching you today is really woven into that experience. Let's start with a little mindset shift. So bloating is not just about the food that we eat. Very often patients think, well, I didn't get bloated right after that food, so it's not that food. Or if they ate something and then got bloated, they tend to want to just blame the food. And it's not always the food's fault. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And constipation is not just about eating more fiber. These symptoms are really the smoke. They're not necessarily the fire. And culturally, I think we've really normalized these issues. So very often women have been told, or they've maybe just done some research on their own and they think, I just need to take a probiotic, or I just need to add more fiber, or carrying belly weight and bloating is just a part of aging. But chronic bloating, irregular or infrequent bowel movements, gas, heaviness, and abdominal discomfort, these are definitely signs that your gut-brain hormone axis is out of rhythm. And if we think back to some previous episodes, we know why this matters, right? Your gut is involved in neurotransmitter production, hormone detoxification, immune regulation, mood, and metabolic health. So if your gut is inflamed, sluggish, or dysbiotic, then it's going to affect how you feel mentally, emotionally, and energetically. Constipation in particular is going to lead to a backup of estrogens. Remember that reabsorption potentially of toxic estrogens, of toxins, and metabolic waste. And therefore, it's going to create systemic inflammation, hormone imbalance, skin issues. Remember, your skin is a major emunctory or organ of elimination, mood symptoms, and more. So constipation is one symptom that I definitely want you to listen to if you experience it regularly. And I should define what constipation is, first of all, right? So I tend to say to a patient, if you're not having a bowel movement every day, I'm going to consider that constipation. But technically, that might not be the medical diagnosis of constipation, right? So I think that you need to start to learn what your natural, regular rhythm and rate of a bowel movement is and start paying attention to consistency. So you can look up the Bristol stool chart, for example. And in my experience, the healthiest guts are guts that you wake up and you have that well-formed, easy to pass bowel movement, ideally every single day. And bloating isn't just air, right? We don't want to just ignore bloating. It's often the result of fermentation from bacteria or yeast that have overgrown in the wrong place, sometimes the small intestine. And it's a feedback signal that your digestive process has slowed down or stalled. So if you have food sitting and fermenting that you would want to be moving through, it can be a breeding ground for bacteria. Now, additionally, when we have overgrowth or dysbiosis, that can also slow down our stool and create the breeding ground for bacteria again. So it's kind of like a what came first, the chicken or the egg situation for some people. But definitely when I'm working on chronic bacterial overgrowth, I'm looking for other root causes that might have slowed down that transit time. So, what are the common root causes or patterns? So, I'm going to go over the top five that I see as far as causing bloating and constipation, especially in women over the age of 35. So, first is gut brain axis dysfunction and vagal tone. And again, you can go back to our previous episodes on this and learn some more if you'd like. But your digestive system is neurologically governed. So, the vagus nerve that connects from your brainstem down through your gut carries parasympathetic signals to activate motility, enzyme secretion, bile flow, and peristalsis, or movement of the muscles, so that your stool is moving through your gut. When you're stuck in sympathetic overdrive or dorsal vagal shutdown, remember from our previous episode on the polyvagal theory, your gut can literally slow down or freeze. So those smooth muscles might not be contracting and moving stool through. This isn't a psychological issue, it's a biological adaptation. Your body is trying to keep you safe and shut down digestion so that it can respond to a stressor. Trauma, chronic stress, perfectionism, emotional suppression, these can all dysregulate this axis. And many of my patients that come to see me with these symptoms in particular of bloating and constipation have a history of being hypervigilant, but exhausted, maybe constantly thinking, worrying, planning ahead, caring for others, and essentially running on empty. Their vagus nerve is very often offline. You might find that they have low vagal tone or heart rate variability. These are often the patients who have struggled with constipation their whole lives. And this is why I start first with assessing the gut brain axis. We can assess things like heart rate variability as an indicator of healthy vagal tone. We can ask questions around sleep. Are you struggling with getting to sleep or staying asleep? As well as stress response, because without regulation or autonomic flexibility, so flexibility to move through those nervous system states we talked about in a previous episode, well, no supplement or protocol is really truly going to work. So remember, for example, when cortisol is high, we might see less hydrochloric acid production. Literally, your food is not getting broken down and moving through. And we might see more leaky gut or high intestinal permeability. But if that patient is never getting into rest, digest, heal, and parasympathetic, it's very hard to just throw a protocol or work on leaky gut. You're not really getting to the root cause then. So I often say that chronically constipated patients will also say, I could never meditate, or I could never have a breathwork practice. They very frequently don't feel comfortable even getting into that state. And this can be because they have not felt safe in their body or because they've not felt safe getting into that parasympathetic state before. So frequently you will hear from those patients, oh, I could never meditate, right? The second common cause of constipation and bloating in perimenopause are hormonal shifts. So, in perimenopause, hormone rhythms are really shifting dramatically, and these changes can directly impact gut function and motility. Progesterone, in particular, tends to slow gut motility by relaxing smooth muscle tone in the digestive tract. And this is why some women might experience more constipation during the luteal phase of their cycle when progesterone is naturally higher, or maybe during pregnancy. In perimenopause, even though progesterone is overall declining, estrogen can remain unopposed. And that can lead to symptoms of relative estrogen dominance, which brings its own gut challenges. Remember, estrogen affects the gut microbiome, histamine pathways, bile production, and water retention. So fluctuations in estrogen can contribute to bloating, to microbial shifts in that gut microbiome, and to increased gut sensitivity. So especially in women who are more histamine sensitive, you might see more frequent bowel movements when estrogen is relatively dominant. And then there's thyroid, which we just had an episode on. And optimal levels of, remember, free T3 are essential for gut motility. So I see a lot of women in perimenopause with suboptimal thyroid function. So maybe you have normal TSH, but low free T3, or maybe elevated reverse T3. And this can show up as sluggish digestion, so slower bowel transit time, cold hands and feet, and low energy or fatigue. So go back and listen to that episode all about the thyroid. And again, we can't ignore cortisol. So chronic stress can deplete hormone precursors. It can disrupt thyroid conversion. It can directly suppress vagal tone. All of these will slow down digestion through the gut-brain axis. So if you come into my office and I hear that you're bloated and constipated, I'm definitely asking what's going on with progesterone, estrogen, thyroid hormones, and cortisol after I'm looking at the gut-brain axis. And third, we have dysbiosis or overgrowth. Now, that can look like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which occurs when bacteria are fermenting carbohydrates too high up or early in the digestive tract, and that's going to produce gas, pressure, and distension. You can have hydrogen dominant SIBO. Typically, hydrogen dominant SIBO patients will have bloating, more of a sense of urgency or loose stool, whereas methane dominant SIBO typically will show up as constipation, slow motility, and harder stools. Certainly, this is not a cut and dry rule, so you can have overlap, you can have both types of SIBO. So I typically am testing for SIBO when a patient has this symptom of bloating after every meal or some obvious signs of that type of dysbiosis or overgrowth. This is a little bit different, or a lot of it different than candida, which is a yeast overgrowth. And that often happens following antibiotic use, a high sugar diet, or even chronic stress suppressing the immune system. And certainly with chronic yeast overgrowth, you will see bloating, fatigue, brain fog, sugar cravings. Sometimes that patient will also have chronic vaginal yeast infections, and candida overgrowth can impact histamine pathways as well. So I'm usually teasing out what type of overgrowth might be present. And in stool testing, I'm going to look for that high fecal secretory IgA, a sign of inflammation. I'm going to look at potentially low pancreatic elastase. So maybe you're not breaking down fat and protein well, and that's why your gut is slowing down. And I'm certainly looking for other microbial markers, in particular, looking at the large intestine for any sort of potential pathogens contributing to bloating or constipation. If I do find other pathogens in a stool test, I might be doing a full-blown RID protocol, which is a therapeutic protocol that I've designed over the last 12 years to rid the body of potential pathogens when necessary. The fourth root cause is kind of a broad category of food, mechanics, and lifestyle habits. So, if we're getting really practical around daily habits, many bloating episodes and constipation can be made worse by eating on the go and rushing and not getting into that rest and digest state, or inadequately chewing our food. All of these can lead to low stomach acid, and low stomach acid production in and of itself can be a reason that we might not be moving our stool through because we're not breaking down that food and digesting it properly. Dehydration or just not getting enough water can be a reason that our bowels won't move through as well or as effectively. And again, that can lead to the bloating. So that slow transit just from dehydration can make us feel bloated. And definitely food sensitivity. So some of the most common ones will be dairy, gluten, soy, and eggs. As you know from previous episodes, I tend to run a food allergy panel, and sometimes I'll consider running a food sensitivity panel. Sometimes it is just a food that we're eating that is bloating us. But typically when someone has lifelong constipation, those are the most common food triggers that I'll see when I run testing. And in some patients, they might have something like a histamine intolerance, or they might find that when they have high histamine foods or fermented foods or leftovers, that they are getting more bloated in response to those foods. I would also put abdominal adhesions in this category. So you might have scar tissue, you may have had a C-section previously, and that can be an obstacle to cure or potentially a reason why your bowel transit time might be a little bit slower. And also how you sit and how you poop matters. So kind of sitting on a traditional toilet doesn't work for everyone. So I will often recommend things like a squatty potty to get a better angle for that bowel movement, or doing things like abdominal massage in the area, maybe considering doing castor oil packs, which we've talked about before, and really helping the body to get into that relaxed state prior to having a bowel movement. So, some patients, I might have them even lay on a yoga block and just relax the pelvic floor and work on relaxing that area to release tension and have a healthy bowel movement. And last, really ruling out emotional and nervous system holding patterns. So I think this piece does often get overlooked, and the gut is our second brain, and constipation can mirror emotional constipation. So maybe difficulty expressing anger, fear of letting go, holding on to tension in the body, and emotional tension so tightly that it's also impacting our bowel movements. As I've talked about in previous episodes, these patients might be patients who are really good candidates for not only co-regulation and a safe and therapeutic relationship with me, but using the safe and sound protocol to feel safe in their body. Again, I might use things like castor oil packs, breath work, heart math, craniosacral therapy to really help them to unwind, relax, and get into that parasympathetic rest and digest state. And I'm certainly giving them language or education around the state that their nervous system is in, and looking at tools to assess their nervous system flexibility. So let's talk about Rachel. She's a 44-year-old busy mom of two. She's recently divorced and she has a full time job in marketing that she loves, but it can be stressful. And when she first came to me, she was very tired. She was gassy and bloated after every meal, and she was having a bowel movement maybe every 3 to 4 days. So, again, I definitely consider that constipated. And she said to me, I've done everything. I cut out gluten and dairy. I tried keto. I did a celery juice fast. My GI doctor did a colonoscopy. Everything was normal. I had an abdominal ultrasound. So another thing that's really important if we do have constipation as a woman and or bloating, we do want to make sure that we've had a proper workup done. We've had imaging done. We've really looked at any anatomical blockages or causes, right? And so she had done all of that. And she was told to utilize a laxative, but she felt intuitively like that couldn't be the right choice long term because she was really inflamed, she was swollen, and she felt like she just didn't recognize her body anymore. Her stool test showed candida overgrowth as a potential pathogen. She actually had low secretory IgA, which commonly I'm looking for high secretory IgA as a sign of inflammation, but we can get into another episode why we might see low secretory IgA. And she had low pancreatic elastase, meaning low enzyme output from her pancreas to break down fat and protein. And her blood work showed low T3. She had borderline low ferritin and suboptimal progesterone on labs. So all of these pieces of the puzzle were super important to me, and we were going to work on all of those through the Vital Spirit method and my 4 pillars and framework for healing. But what stood out to me most was her story. And she said that she had not yet processed her divorce. She kind of put it on the back burner. She was shouldering the weight of raising teens, managing finances that were new and different than they had been for her before, and just kind of keeping everything running and staying above water. So she really didn't have time for herself, but this symptom had gotten so bad that she was uncomfortable and she just knew there's got to be something going on. Some of the first things that we did were actually just taking the time to slow down in the morning, pause, and start our morning with hydration and lemon water. And I had her start doing a deep breath work practice. So just inhaling for the count of 4 and exhaling for the count of 6 to start. We didn't really do anything fancy in the beginning. And she was just taking some time in the morning to do that. Make sure she was hydrated and start with a gentle breath work practice for a couple of minutes and just really connecting with her body and kind of saying, good morning, hi body, here's some hydration. We're going to get my digestive process started with some lemon water. And we kept the beginning really, really simple, the beginning of her day anyway. And then I started weaving in the safe and sound protocol. Again, you can go back to a previous episode on that. And I was having her do safe and sound protocol listening twice a week on her lunch break. And I was having her go sit outside to do that. So she was getting outside on her break. Ideally, it was sunny, although I can't always guarantee that in the Northeast where we live. But she was going and listening to that neural exercise that was getting her into that ventral vagal safe and really starting to get comfortable with the sensation of moving up and down that autonomic nervous system ladder. So the feeling of regulation versus dysregulation, and starting to know what it meant to be in a parasympathetic rest and digest state. At night, I had her doing castor oil packs over her liver. And that was also a time where I recommended she take 1 to 3 minutes to do a breathwork practice. And if she felt so inclined, maybe listen to a guided meditation or just some calming music. I was also having her support with magnesium at night, and she was doing bitter herbs before her meals. I did share with her my 21-day gut healing reset. And so she watched those 3 1-hour videos, and she really got educated on things that she could be doing every day throughout the day to support gut motility and reduce bloating. By the second week of doing that, she reported that her bloating was cut in half. And by the third week, she had started to have more consistent bowel movements, better energy, and she even noticed that her skin was clearer, which wasn't something that she had attributed to gut health before. But for me, the biggest turning point was that one day she had come into the office to do her safe and sound protocol listening, and we had done a little bit of cranial sacral work as well. And before she left, she said, I feel like I'm digesting my life, not just my food. So I think that allowing her space and really even putting it in her protocol, in her treatment plan, and saying, you're going to take time and space to sit and do a few minutes of breath work and feel like you're in that relaxed, regulated space, it did allow her to think, to process, to feel some of the emotions that she had kind of otherwise been pushing through and putting on the back burner. And I think that that is so key in terrain healing, right? I can give a rid protocol. I can get rid of pathogens. I can give digestive enzymes or bitters. I can make sure that you're hydrated. I can make sure your thyroid is optimal and cortisol is not excessively being produced all day long and suppressing digestion. But very often it is giving our body the time, the space, and what it needs to heal. And that's getting into that regulated state. So I'm going to walk you through a few of the terrain-based tools that I do teach inside of the 21-day gut healing reset. And some of these are the same ones that I think helped Rachel the most. So step one is restoring regular rhythms and rituals. So your gut needs a rhythm. I really recommend that you wake up and drink water first thing in the morning. You can try adding some lemon water, maybe some apple cider vinegar. That's one of my favorites. I add a lemon and a little bit of apple cider vinegar to water every single morning, and I drink that down. If you struggle with motility or bloating, fresh ginger root is a great addition to that as well. And then I highly recommend that you walk every single day, and especially walk or stretch a little bit after meals, and just work on giving the gut actual movement to help with its own motility. And going to bed and waking up at consistent times. Again, ideally, we're digesting our food. We're in rest and digest, sleeping at night, right? And then we wake up and we have a healthy bowel movement and eliminate at the same time every day. And if you need to, you can use things like the squatty potty or some relaxing exercises before you have that bowel movement to get you into that nice, relaxed state. Another great simple strategy is using bitter herbs to stimulate digestion before meals. So bitter herbs are going to stimulate your stomach acid, your enzyme production, and bile production. And some great examples of this are going to be dandelion, gentian, artichoke leaf, ginger, Swedish bitters, starting your meal with an arugula salad. All of these are strategies that tell your body it's time to eat. It's time to start the digestive process. I typically am recommending that patients do this along with just a nice little 1 to 2 minute breath work, calming, relaxing practice before you eat. Ideally, you've also been kind of smelling the food and telling your body it's going to get ready to receive nutrients. And if bile is sluggish, especially if you feel kind of nauseous after a more fatty meal, or you have pale stool, or definitely if you've had your gallbladder removed, then I might use things like ox bile or bile salts during a reset as well. Liver and lymph support are key when we have constipation or bloating. And so our liver really regulates bile flow and hormone detoxification as a result. So some of the tools that I very frequently use and have mentioned before are going to be castor oil packs, both over the abdomen and the liver in particular, using those bitter herbs before meals, drinking our dandelion tea and even liver supportive teas like milk thistle. And then you can use lymph support techniques like dry skin brushing, rebounding, again, walking, getting the lymphatic system moving is going to be part of that healthy digestion and elimination process. Some supplements you might consider with your practitioner to support motility and repair gut health might be magnesium. In particular, magnesium citrate is going to be magnesium that is more going to move your bowels. You might, again, consider digestive enzymes or support with hydrochloric acid. You might support with bile salts when needed. I use a lot of mucilaginous herbs in my practice, like slippery elm, marshmallow. I might use aloe for gut healing. And on occasion, might use binders like charcoal when I'm doing a RID protocol if a patient is experiencing die off symptoms. And I'm definitely talking about food as medicine, right? So in any reset, we do eliminate inflammatory trigger foods. Again, those most commonly will be dairy, gluten, and sugar. And I am talking all about nourishing the gut with healthy cooked veggies, lots of different varieties of fibers, maybe ground flax, chia, hemp. Occasionally I'll use psyllium. We'll use bone broth or maybe a collagen support for gut healing. Definitely fermented foods, if well tolerated. My favorite is sauerkraut or kimchi. And I'm always talking about using herbal teas, fennel, ginger, peppermint, chamomile is a great soothing digestive tea. So it's not necessarily about restricting your diet, but it is about creating nourishment and utilizing whole foods and really removing food triggers. And usually I do recommend working with a practitioner to figure that out. So, if Rachel's story resonated with you, or if you're bloated, constipated, exhausted, and unsure what to do next, then I do invite you to check out my 21-day gut healing reset. That's on my website. And it is a guided naturopathic program that brings together gut healing foods, daily rituals, nervous system regulating tools, and my expert support and guidance to help you rebuild from the inside out. Thank you for joining me today on the Vital Spirit podcast. If this episode helped you feel seen, understood, or more hopeful, please leave a review, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Because when women heal their guts, they begin to trust their body again, and that changes everything. Remember, healing is not about perfection, it's about rhythm, regulation, and returning to yourself. Have a great day.